How many does work for the Corps right now? How many of you all, you got a PXP, you got the USACE template, you've taken it down, you've done it, use the M3? Who knows what the M3 is? A couple people in there. So I'm open to whatever you guys want to do. It really doesn't, I'm either way. This thing on? Hello? I mean, you want me to go through what I got? That's maybe, that's fine too. It's very high level. Doesn't really get into the software. It's more contractual, more stuff about what and why, not the, hey, if I set my visibility settings on this sheet, what happens kind of thing. It's really more of why the Corps is doing it, what the language looks like, what the process looks like. And, I'm sorry? Yeah. You want to do that? All right, so why don't we just plow through what we got, and then we'll just open up the questions once our guys get going here.
It keeps cutting off our screen, so I'm not sure what's going on.
Can you turn off the polygon system?
That's what I'm trying to figure out how to do.
Unplug it.
That always works.
There's gotta be a master panel switch somewhere to turn the building on.
So let me start with a little history. How's that? Can you guys hear me okay? Do you mind if I sit up here? Anyone for tennis? No. So in 2005-ish, really 2006 is when it started, but the groundwork was laid in 2005. Gentleman out of the Fort Worth district by the name of Steve Hutzel was tasked by the Corps of Engineers to put together a group of industry people that have done work for the Corps and come up with standardized BIM contract language. Because what was happening was people were all over the board. If you don't know, how many people here don't do work for the Corps of Engineers? Never done work before at all for the Corps? Oh, kind of. So the Corps of Engineers is really an interesting entity. And I put interesting in quotation marks. So the Corps is really, if you get down to it, they're the owner's engineer. They're the owner's representative. So in most cases, in a lot of cases, they're not doing work for themselves. They're doing work for somebody else. So the requirements are not necessarily from the Corps. It's for whoever you're doing work for. So if you're doing work for Fort Benning or if you're doing work for Whiteman Air Force Base, it's their deliverables that they're trying to hit. The Corps also is in charge of centers of standardization. Anybody here worked on a centers of standardization project before? No? No what a centers? Okay. So a centers of standardization is, the Corps has 43 building types that they use over and over and over again. If you've done work for the Corps, you've probably worked on maybe a company operations building, or maybe a dorm, a UEPH, or a temp, tank engineering maintenance facility, maybe, church. What have you guys worked on? What kind of projects for the Corps have you worked on?
Healthcare.
Healthcare?
Chapel.
Chapel's one of the buildings up out of Omaha. Ben, what you worked on?
Can't talk about it.
Egypt, okay.
No.
Or RCMS.
Pantex.
Pantex, oh, okay. Corps does the Pantex work now?
It's a new one.
Okay, so, because that's all DOE and super secret stuff, we'd have to kill you. Anyway, those types of facilities, they make a lot of, and they do them over and over and over again. So what they did is they standardized the design. And at the same time, what was happening was they had what was called BRAC, B-R-A-C, base realignment and closure. Basically saying, hey, we're going to close this army post over here, and we're going to move these 20,000 people over to here. So we need to build enough infrastructure for the 20,000 people that are moving. Because of all that work, they needed standardized contract language. So I happen to be part of the group that started it, and they went out into industry and they found people that knew multiple systems. because the Corps had multiple clients, right? Some of the Army was half Autodesk, half Bentley. The Air Force was mostly Autodesk, partly Bentley. The Coast Guard was Graphisoft, ArchiCAD. So when we first started, and how many people here have ever heard of Attachment F? The original BIM contract language that says you will model this and model that. Well, when we first started to figure out the contract language, we literally had to sit around the room and said, okay, doors, can you do that? Can you do that? Can your software do that? Can your software do that? You know, and we had to go through. We couldn't use we tried not to use any name that was software specific. So we couldn't say parameters, we couldn't say attributes, and we couldn't say properties, and we couldn't, you know, that's why the contract language says business data. Because we try to generalize it so nobody had, you know, anything going on there. And what happened is that the contract language went out, and it caused a ruckus. It caused a big ruckus because people weren't ready for it. You know, so the people that were involved stepped back, and the group grew, and we kind of honed it and brought it to where it is today. Yes, sir.
Can we save this off and try it off this machine here?
Sure.
Okay.
You need a.
I gotta drive if you're okay.
Sure. That's fine.
Sorry guys, technical difficulties tonight.
Please stand by. Unfortunately, I got a whole bunch of stuff that. No, but where do you want to put this?
There's a, you can prove it.
I got other stuff to put in there.
That's fine.
Oh, you're fine. All right. Nope. Sorry, don't mind the guy behind the screen.
They can't see any of
We
it.
unplug this because it's driving me nuts. What's going on? This, and that, and that.
No, that's where
Oh. So while we figure this out, is this not playing once? I was thinking about it. It's not very fun right now. So the people that went out and are part of the consortia, the BIM consortia, you're good to go. Go ahead, Dave. Yeah, you're good. So the people that are part of the BIM consortia, they're not paid by the Corps. It's all volunteer. Their company pays for time, travel, and labor. Right now, there's, God, I don't know, 40 or 50 some odd members of the consortia-ish. And then there's a whole other side to talk about. And so, let me see. Let me get it. It's back in. So I'm kind of stalling right now until we figure out what's going on here. So that's kind of the history. Was the Corps needed standard language? That's where it comes from. They had a whole bunch of work that had to be done. There are 47 districts in the United States alone, and everybody was doing their own thing, and that's not good. So they got together and they just decided, hey, let's go ask industry of what makes sense. So that's where the history of where the language comes from. Still not working?
Sorry.
Want to come gather around my computer? What do you guys do to my computer, man? It's like 640 by 40. Nah, that's all good. All right. So, Heath, I don't know what to do here, man.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine, man. It's all good. There's a lot of it's visual, you know?
Can we run directly with the TV?
That's about where I'm going.
Okay.
Well, he's got something going right now.
As long as we can make it for a few seconds without
Losing it?
Polycom kicking back over us. Which I think we're doing okay, actually. Here, I got. Just see that, and then drag. Polycom hasn't come back, so I think we're okay. We'll be able to run from here.
Okay. All right. We'll try.
Thank you.
You want to turn the light off, or can you guys see?
Yeah. Okay, guys?
See what happens here. All right, so we talked about develop collaboration of industry. Went and got BIM aggressive firms, mutually beneficial BIM issues, which was the biggest thing about having the industry together was the core. When the core first started putting their BIM requirements out before this, people were saying they were too hard. Can't meet this, impossible to do, can't do it. So Steve went out and he found a bunch of firms, and they came together, and there are various firms that it started that have been doing intelligent 3D design for a long time. And the whole point behind it was to make sure that things were fair, practical, and reasonable. There was nothing that was put into the contract that couldn't be done. And like I said, we would literally go around the room of, can you do this, can you do this, can you do this? Yes, we can. Can you do this, can you do this? You know, so we had to go through and do that. And in the beginning, I'll show you what the contract language used to look like. In the very beginning, this is the presentation from a few years ago. You know, the language was, let's look at some of the minimum modeling requirements. So they would get down to, you know, very detailed things about doors had to be this way, and walls had to be this way, and then we moved it out to the M3, and it was all in here. This is the actual language that it talks about, schedules, classification, things of that nature. So we went around the table and basically said, can you do that, can you do that, can you do that? And if it wasn't reasonable, fair, or practical, we didn't do it. The other thing that was important about the whole language was the people that are in the room, for lack of a better term, check their egos out the door. Because it's not about them, it's about the core. And everyone has to put themselves in the core's thought process. It's not, oh, I'm on the committee and how can I make this work for firm A because we can get all the work. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with what was the end goal for the end user and the end people. You know, a good facility. You're laughing.
I'll go back to the last meeting.
Yeah. There are people that want to do that, and those people are on a wait list, and they won't be admitted to the group. So again, like I talked about, participation is strictly voluntary. All costs are incurred by the firms. Core doesn't pay for anything. The only thing they do pay for, if you will, is they provide a facility, you know, for the monthly and quarterly meetings. Websites, on-site and web meetings, and you have to be involved at some level, otherwise they kick you out, or they put you on inactive reserve, and you kind of have to come back in at some point. Some things that, if you didn't know, the core has and works on are these things here. So these are all available upon the CAD BIM Center webpage. And I'm going to make this presentation available so everyone can download it, so like we did before. So USACE products, processes, and policies. You've got CAD standards, BIM standards, roadmaps, ERMs, ECBs, and contract requirements. So the CAD standards, how many people here are familiar with the AEC CAD standard? So it's a superset of the national CAD standard. So basically, the easiest way that I can explain it is, if for those who aren't familiar with it, is the national CAD standard, for example, does not require symbology. It only requires layer name. AEC CAD standard tells you what symbology has to look like. That's the very basic example, but what the AEC CAD standard does is basically implement the national CAD standard to the Corps of Engineers requirements. You know, this stuff has to look this way, sheets have to look that way. So the thing that people don't realize when it comes to AEC CAD standard is you have to have a copy of the national CAD standard to make it work. So if you don't have a copy of the national CAD standard, go out and buy a copy. It's not that bad. It's like $300 for a copy. If you want a site license, I think it's $2,000. But so if you're a Burns and Mac, $2,000 divided by 10,000 people is very,
5, but.
well, 5. Okay. So, I can tell you anecdotally right now, there is discussion right now. There are some people. I have to watch how I say this because I'm being taped.
I can edit out anything you don't want said.
Oh, that's fine. This is personal.
I wouldn't trust him.
This is personal opinion. This is personal opinion. I've had an issue with Revit since Revit 9.1 because Revit makes a crap DWG file. It just does, and it can't make a AEC CAD compliant standard. Perfect example is that you guys use the little AIA.txt file that when you make a file you export out CAD files, you control some of the symbology. It doesn't do a very good job on system families. The Corps separates out their HVAC systems based on what it is, if it's a supply or return. But when you save it out as a file, it all goes to one thing in AutoCAD or MicroStation. So you have to spend your time to fix it because you can't turn in a non-compliant CAD file. And I've been beating up Autodesk on this for years, and now there's people in the industry that think, well, maybe we should just change the CAD standard to match what Revit can do. I'm like, well, that's not really fair to the rest of the world. Just because Revit can't do it, Graphisoft can do it, Bentley can do it, so why can't Revit and Autodesk and the people that own the DWG file format, why can't they make it better? So let's not try to dumb it down, let's try to bring it up. All right, I'm off my soapbox. So anyway, these are the AEC CAD standards. The AEC CAD standard itself is a free download. The National CAD standard is not, you have to pay for it. So. CAD details library, CAD drafting standard, and the graphics standard, all free. The details library is basically a bunch of symbols. The drafting standard is their drafting, you know, how they want drawings to look. And the graphics standard is more how they want BIM things to look. All available up on the CAD, erdic.cad.mil or whatever the website is now. If you Google CAD BIM Center, it'll take you right to it. National BIM standard best practice. If you go up to NBIMS or the NIST or up to the whole building design guide, there's the National BIM standard. And in 2014, the National BIM standard included the USACE BIM contract requirements as a best practice, as a published official way saying this works, this is good stuff, you should follow it. Because it's been vetted, it's been well thought out, it's been used. And it was agreed upon by a bunch of industry people. Jump in here anytime, guys, because Adam, you look like you're mad and just sitting back there ready to come out of your chair. So you guys, you know, come on. So if you guys got anything, just jump in whenever. But anyway, the National BIM standard said this is a good way to do business, so they included it in. BIM roadmaps, they started in 2006 and then they redid it because the Corps wants things for the entire life cycle, not just for design, and not just for a little bit of construction. Because, you know, if you look at the life cycle of the building or a facility, right, what, design's 3%, construction's 4%, and occupation is the other 93%. So let's use that for something else. And then you got maintenance and decommissioning and all that fun stuff. So what they did is they rewrote the roadmap, and then because the Corps is a dual platform, there is a BIM implementation guide for Autodesk, there's a BIM implementation guide for Bentley. The Coast Guard decided in 2010 to go to Autodesk. So there's no more Graphisoft in the Corps. So it's either Autodesk or Bentley, depending on the requirements of the contract. ECBs, engineering construction bulletins, these are basically, they'll get redone every couple of years, but the idea is these are the standardization for construction. It's basically, it's a policy letter that says do BIM and go follow the BIM rules, and they just re-up it every couple of years. They're up on the CAD BIM Center as well. These are the big ones. I would suggest you just know all Army vertical construction projects, regardless of where they're paid from, will use BIM. So basically what they're saying is no more 2D, period. Now you have to deliver a 2D deliverable, but they want you to use BIM for the betterment of the project. So it doesn't matter how it's funded. If it's funded through the Corps, if it's funded through the Army, if it's funded through INSOC, if it's funded through Congress, wherever it's funded through, you will do some form of BIM. All other vertical construction projects shall use BIM unless directed by the customer. So what they're saying is, if the Corps is acting on behalf of the Navy, and the Navy said, hey, look, we don't want BIM and here's the reason why, and they get it approved, then you don't have to do BIM. You don't have to follow a BIM process. Otherwise, if you work, basically what this says is if you're working for the Corps and you're doing some kind of BIM with it, you know, then this is the way it is. A lot of people don't like that. I don't know what you guys think. What do you guys think? Well, yeah, you're saying, yeah, that's cool, but some people don't like being told you're going to do this. So, because, you know, if you're working on a spec building for a developer, you pretty much probably have your say to do whatever you want. But these are very specific requirements, so. Good, bad, and different? Kurt?
Good.
Good. Ben? Good.
Just don't force me to do Bentley.
I can't control you there. Can't control that.
That's good, that's good.
What?
That you're not controlling that.
No, okay, so let's be very clear. I am not the Corps. I am not speaking on behalf of the Corps. And having said that, there are 16 districts in the Corps of Engineers that are standardized on Revit. There are 8 districts that are standardized on Bentley. And if you get a contract that says do it in A or B, you got to do it in A or B. And then you have to make the business decision whether or not you want to do it or not. So, I'm not going to get into personal preference here, because you're not going to like my personal preference. So. Advanced modeling requirements, which is what we'll talk about a little bit. All Milcon projects, all SRM, meaning anything like, that's a historical preservation project that's funded differently, or a modernization project. I don't know, have you guys ever worked on an SRM project before? That's like when you go into like Fort Leavenworth and you take a building that was built like in the 1800s and you got to modernize it. So that type of money comes from a different place than where Milcon money comes from. So that's why they separate it out. Civil works projects, those are like dams, locks, levees, things like that. That's those civil guys. And then there's a threshold there, basically a $2.5 million design and construction budget, or a 5,000 gross square foot. Civil works is $2.5 million. I've actually worked on a core project on a building that was 450 square feet. So it was a blast test facility. It was basically a room about half this size, and they would put a bomb in the building and see if it would blow it up. So kind of cool. Hey, your tax money at work. So.
It's fine.
So the core modeling requirements are built into three things. There's contract language, there's the project execution plan template, and then there's the M3, the minimum modeling matrix. Okay, so the top one, the language, says this is what you're going to do. The middle one is you telling the core this is how you're going to do it. And the third one, the M3, is, for lack of a better term, and I hate this term, LOD, level of detail. This is telling people you're going to model this wall down to these wall components. You're going to model this door down to this level of specificity. And you're going to attach this type of data to it, and this is what you're going to do. So there's three pieces to it. What you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and to what level you're going to do it. In development right now, there's a submittal review checklist to help you and the Corps. So when you submit something to the Corps, you have a checklist that you put in that you've met all the things you have to submit. Have you submitted an editable authoring model? Have you submitted a non-editable viewable model? Have you submitted CAD compliant DWG files? Have you submitted a visualization? So you go through a checklist. And the guide is to help you and the Corps who's delivering it kind of make sure you're doing it right.
How do you handle the LOD on existing structures? Because there's a little on the eyes part of it. The LOD is very heavy on the eye and BIM.
Mm-hmm. There's a reason why, but.
Right, and then for new construction, it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
For existing, it's sometimes can be pretty tough because you've got to go out and verify all kinds of things to meet that, the I part of the BIM
Yep.
in the LOD.
Yep. So what was your question?
Do they require that
For
for
existing-
existing
Yes.
buildings?
If it's in the contract, if it's in the, do they require it? Yes. Because the goal for the Corps in general is they want a facility database. So build it into, so my suggestion to you is just build it into your cost and say, hey, look, if you want this level of detail for an existing building, I've got to go out and survey your building. And surveying your building isn't necessarily going out and just doing a laser scan or a photogrammetric mesh model creation. You got to go out and validate a lot of that data, because a lot of that data doesn't exist. You got to go figure out, you know, when was this air conditioning unit put in and who made it, and because another word that I don't like, and maybe you guys do, but I don't like it, is Kobe. And they want Kobe. Now, Kobe is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. Kobe is it's a standard process. I just think it's overkill. I think there's too much information in it. So yeah, it's, yeah, oh yeah. All right, so let's talk about proven results, and then we'll get into the other stuff. They've done over 500 projects. They've done over 40 million square feet, $9 billion in construction using this process. It's proven. May not agree with it all, but it's proven. Adopted by others. Army, Defense Health Agency, actually, if you've ever done anything for the Defense, for the DHA, their MBR is based on the Corps of Engineer standards. The Air Force has adopted it, NAFAC has adopted it, and the FAA is adopting it. They're trying to get them all to use the same, but I don't think it'll ever happen because everybody wants their own little nuance of it. You know, we want this part, but not that part. So, why is contract language needed? It? Because if you don't require it, you don't get it. If you don't check it, you won't get it. Take the core out of it for a second. If you've ever subbed to a, if you've ever been a subcontractor to a master contractor or a master engineer, or if you are subcontracting people and you get something from them and says, hey, this isn't right, this is not what I asked for, well, it's not in your contract. Same thing with them. It's not in the contract, the Corps not going to get it, that's why they put it in. And back to what you guys said, Keith, it's not in the contract, don't do it. So, or RFI it at least and say, hey, what do you want? So that way you can put in a proper bid.
We ran into that with, what is it for, the data center for the US Marine. Unfortunately, they didn't go by this, they had more than they wanted.
Which surprises me because the Marine is part of the Navy and they're supposed to go by NAFAC rules.
So it was very surprising. We just have to do it. Walk through
So if it's not written down, then you're not doing it.
Right.
And the Corps knows that because they're the kings of contract language,
They
you know?
have no idea what they.
Well, for Marines, yeah, so contract language, that was the first part, right? So you got it, so they get what they want. Second part was the PXP template, which we'll get into. Why is this needed? To use a term in the industry, this is so the Corps doesn't get bamboozled. In the early part of their BIM journey, in the mid to late 2000s to about 2012, we were shown some of the RFP responses with redacted names. Some of the people that submitted their RFP responses went from everywhere from a page of, yes, we can do BIM and we're the best, to a 80-page dissertation of how they invented computer engineering in the 50s, and everything in between. And there was no standard to judge whether or not, sorry, I'm going to use a phrase here, they had no way to call bullshit. They had no way to say, no, they had no way to prove. They also had, someone would say, we're going to do BIM, we're going to do, and Ben, I'm not going to use you as an example, but I'm going to use your example as the example. Contract said, do it in Bentley, deliver it in Bentley. Corps would get a Revit model at the end and a set of DWGs. And, well, this isn't the contract language. That's not what you said. Well, this is what we said in the contract, but they didn't go and check them as they went. So they had no idea what they were getting. And the same with reverse. Somebody would want a Revit model and they'd get a Bentley model. So they needed a way to basically make sure that you, as the winning bidder, are going to do what they say you're going to do. And that's what the PXP does. So the PXP is based on the Penn State Project Execution Guide. Are you guys familiar with the Penn State Guide? Ever seen it before? Yes, no? A little bit? Yes, or?
I'm not sure you can see my head back there, so
Okay,
yes.
yeah. So what we did is, the Penn State Guide is meant to be a template. So they took the template and they turned it into the Corps Guide. It's got a common, if you want to do this for your own internal processes, you can do that. The Penn State Guide does have a common, what's the word I'm looking for? Creative Commons license, which means that it's open source and you can use it as long as you cite where it came from. It's in there, it's level 4 Creative Commons license. So if Owens and Mac wanted to create their own new internal BIM project guide, you can use the Penn State Guide. You just got to say it came from Penn State. So within the guide, I'm going to open it up here. So in the guide is, basic stuff, project name, project location, who developed it, all that kind of stuff. And as you go through it, it talks about, the change log in here now, which is kind of nice, where it came from. And then there's information in here about, okay, what type of facility is it, what project name is it, contract type, all the logistics about your project. Let's get to some of the guts of it, though. A lot of the work you do for the Corps of Engineers, you may not do yourselves. Owens & Mac, Kiewit, maybe you're a little different because you're a larger firm. You may do all disciplines yourself. But Keith, with Rogue Designs, is not going to do electrical engineering and blast, and you're not going to do ATFP, right? You're not going to do anti-terrorism force protection. You're going to get together with somebody else. You're going to be on a joint venture. Okay. The point of this is to have a nice communication plan and identify who everybody is, who are the players, who's responsible, who's the single point of contact for all of these areas. You would be surprised how many people didn't want this when this was put out for markup to the industry. Not on our team, but out there. I don't want to give it. I'm going to just gonna do the work, I'll do it my way. No. Doesn't work that way anymore, kids. BIM is not a silo, it's a collaboration, and you gotta talk to people, you gotta do things. Model uses. So, the Corps is asking you to use BIM, or is demanding you to use BIM, because they want more out of your design, because they want to use it through the process. I'm not sure, can you guys see that okay in the back, or I need to zoom in a little bit more? I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see a little better. So, there's basically 4 parts of the core area when it comes to design. They got planning, design, construction, and operation. Everything you see in red is a requirement. If you're going to do a core project and you're going to use, and you're in the design phase, you will use a BIM process at a minimum to do design authoring, progress reviews, and interference management. Required. And you have to show them that you're doing it. They will ask you at the 35% or 65% submittal, where is your clash detection records? Show me where you're at. And if you don't do it, they're going to call you out on it. Because in the contract language, there's actually a line in the contract language that says you have to demonstrate this plan in some fashion to the Corps before you start the project. And if they don't like what they see, they will send it back to you and say, do it again, and they'll hold money back. That's in the contract language. Because this, when you submit it, becomes contract language. It becomes something the contracting officer can use over you. So, be careful. If you submit to something, submit something and you check it, the Corps is going to hold you to it for the most part. So, if you say, as a differentiator, Adam comes in and says, hey, you know what, we're going to do energy analysis. You know, we've got our ecotech running, we got train trace rolling, and we got a connection here. We're going to do eLoom, and we're going to do DROFIS with program validation. And we're going to do all this stuff because we want the job, and we're telling you we're better than anybody else, so we're going to use BIM for these things. When you submit that, that becomes contract language. You have to do it. Now, they're not going to, like any other standard project, they're not going to ask you for your calcs. They ask you for the results. But they're going to want you to talk about, this is what I do. My advice to you when it comes to this document, to this part of the document, is this is your differentiator when you go to get work. The more you check box here, the more that you show that your team is doing, the more the Corps likes to see that. Because they know that you're pushing the boundaries, you know that you're using the model, then more, you're using the model for more than just a contract document generator. What do you think of that? Agree, disagree? Hey Sean, you're full of crap? No.
Using it for what it's for.
You're using it for what it's for.
That information.
If you're using, okay, personal opinion, if you're using a BIM process, no matter the software, to generate drawings, you're missing out. I'm not saying drawings aren't important. Those are what you put your stamp on, right? That's what we go to court over. That's what I put my seal on. And that's all I'm going to talk about when I get in front of the judge. But if you're not using the model for more than that, then you might want to think about what do we want to use the model for. All right. So what are the benefits for the Corps? It assists them in planning. It assists them and assists you in planning your process. The big thing for this is standard format. It means that if you all submit something the same way, and Johnny BIM manager at Kansas City District gets hit by a bus one day, then Reggie BIM manager in the Baltimore District can pick up his work and he can judge based on the same information. It gives everybody the same playing field. M3. So before I go on, any questions on the template? We got it open, so if you want to go, we can come back to it. We can just plow through this and come back to whatever you want to do. All right, M3, minimum modeling requirements. So the previous version of the M3 was text. It was just in the contract language. You will model doors to this specificity. You will model conduit down to the, 2-inch line. You will model pipe that's 2 inches or bigger. You will model conduit 2 inches or bigger. So it was all in the contract language, and it was frankly, it was a little vague. Because, would you really model every single conduit, or would you say, look, I got a big bundle about this big, I'm just gonna model it as one thing, and I'll deal with it later. Because I need space control, I don't necessarily need to provide the contractor with an exact length of every single conduit in the duct bank. So, at the time, the AIA, how many people use the AIA LOD language or know it? What do you think?
I like the updated version.
The updated version is better. The original version, not so much. And that's all that was out there. So the Corps said, it doesn't work for us. And so the Corps said, we're just gonna make our own. What makes sense for us? So that's what they did. A lot of people were, so ambiguous and open to interpretation. So the M3 is very, very specific. And if I open up the M3, it's a nice little spreadsheet. It's got a nice table of contents and instructions in here how to use it. Basically, if you go into the scope and grade, the entire matrix, the minimum modeling matrix, the M3, is built in classification format. It's in it's Omni format, not Omni format, master format. And actually it is Omni unit and master. So basically you can do either thing. The whole idea is that you go down this column right here and you say whether or not something's in your contract, if I'm working on it, yes or no. And if it's no, it'll just blank out. And it gives you an idea of what level of detail, what grade I need for the construction documents, and what grade do I need for the record model. So let's go back over and talk about what does grade mean. So basically what it means is that if you look at something like a door, and you look at it in plan view, you look at the data, if it's a grade 100, it's basically the minimum stuff. If I was doing a 35% design, if I was doing schematic design, if I was doing some kind of simple layout. Level 200, generalized system or assemblies, approximate quantities and size. So the example they have in here is, if I'm doing level 100 and I'm laying out an outside area and I need a pump somewhere, I'm gonna put a box there, I'm just gonna cube and label it. Maybe it's a massing object, but I'll label it, that's a box, that's a pump. If I'm doing level 200, I'm gonna go up to Fairbanks Morse or Victaulic, I'm gonna grab a simple pump. I don't care what model it is, I don't care what the in and out sizes are, I just need something that takes up some space that looks more like a pump. That's level 200. Level 300 is, I got an 8-inch inlet coming in, I got a 4-inch inlet going out, it's 30 gallons per minute, it's got information on it, it's big, it's more detailed. That's what we're talking about here. And the dot basically says I'm looking at the parent for what I need if it's not available. So for example, right here on foundations, driven piles, level 300. Board piles, 300, but foundation anchors are only level 100. So when you do a project, you can just go through here and say, Adam, you're right there in my line of sight, so I'm sorry, I'm going to borrow you. So I'll go down here to, let's go down to Adam's world and the mechanical, which I believe is what, down here's some plumbing, for example. He's going to put basically no and everything above that, architectural, structural, civil, doesn't care. He's working on mechanical. So he's going to go through here and say, okay, does this project have domestic water equipment? Yes or no. Does this project have domestic water piping? Yes or no. And when you fill this out, it'll help you determine what you've got to put in your model and what level. There's no more ambiguity. This is what it is. It also provides, go back to Heath. Heath on his joint venture team provides everybody with the same information of what they're gonna do, so everyone knows and is on the same page. This gets submitted. Some people have asked, well, how come they didn't use the AIA? We talked about that. How come they didn't use the BIM form? Well, the BIM form was doing their own thing, and I think the BIM form's gone off the deep end a little bit by going 100 through 500, they add a 350, and then they're doing whatever else they're doing. This is easy, and it's simple. There's only 3 versions of it. Either it's a box, something simple, or something detailed. It's not anything more than that. But the Corps is giving you all these tools to help you figure out what you need to do on your project. The grade, element grade, A, B, or C. So A is 3D with facility data, meaning it's got to have enough information on it so it can be intelligent or COBie. B is a 2D facility data. There's some cases where you just don't need a 3D object, but you need the data on the object. So you stick in a 2D symbol and you stick some data on it. And 2D only, drafting, line work, text, whatever's in your drafting lines, your drafting views, that's all over there. Original grade adjusted for contracts, changes for field conditions is your plus, your minus is not included in the model. So we go back over to, here to the N3. We'll say, for example, I need grade A for construction document, but I need more when I do the record model. So it's telling you, depending on what your contract says, to get out drawings, I need this, but when I deliver an as-built model or a record model, I need this.
So it's dividing up the information and the model?
Yes.
Two separate?
2 separate things.
Okay, that's nice.
Well, it also makes it easier for you because then you know if you're, especially with the Corps doing more design build and less design bid build, the record model or the as-built model, depending on your flavor, it says in there you have to deliver that, right? So do you want to do it as you go, or do you want to do it at the end and try to take a liquidated damages kit for not delivering something that's in your contract? So if you know at the very beginning, hey, we're going to have to add manufacturer data or information about these pumps or information about this door hardware as part of the delivery, this tells you that. So yeah, separating the graphics from the data is a good way to say it. So I just kind of walked you through this, but it kind of tells you the same thing of start here, pick your grade, look at the grade, and then you start looking through your levels right down here in the minimum model requirements. It's pretty simple, and there's instructions in here. I mean, if you go back over to the tab and the instructions, it tells you exactly modify column F, filters are available, bi-directional links between everything is in here. It tells you exactly what the level of definitions mean, tells you exactly what the grade and description means. It's got frequently asked questions. This is a lot of work. Why do we need this? Because you do. Who do I contact with questions? I will tell you this, those guys are in Seattle, so they're 2 hours behind you. So if you call them at 8, they'll be asleep. One thing that I like about it, personally, is I like the fact, and this took a lot of time to do, is, do we have any contractors in here? Do you have any GCs in here? Okay. What classification system do you use? You build by uniform map probably, when you get your specs?
Yes.
Okay. So does it drive you nuts when, and pardon me, when the architects, the engineers give you a master format, you gotta spend all that time going down and figuring out what's what and trying to cross-connect it?
I'm sure they do.
It does, yeah. And how many people here have heard of OmniClass before? Well, OmniClass is the next level of master format, and that's what they use on the owner's side. It's got more specificity, goes up to level 5. What I like about the modeling matrix and both softwares, both Revit and the Bentley side, but if you do that for the core, they tell you what the classification system is, so you don't have to figure it out anymore. If you click on the model, you open up Navisworks, you pick on a door, it's going to tell you all 3 classification systems, so you don't have to go figure that stuff out anymore. That's a big time saver, because everybody uses the model differently. What are you on time? I'm rambling, so. I think I had an hour, and I think I have 5 minutes left.
Yeah. It's a 2 hour.
And I'm about halfway through, so. There's an article out there on the Military Engineer talking about the use of the M3 if you want to go see it. I'll read that I'll put that in the, you'll have this, you can go get it. Specification section, blah, 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 that's basically putting what you just saw into the contract language. That 013316.00.10, that's internal core language for the contract. The other part of it, and I'll kind of get through this too, is so he said, well, what have they been doing for 5 years since last I was here? Well, they established an entire civil information modeling process. So now the Corps, if you do civil work for the Corps, you will now see civil information modeling requirements, site and GIS requirements that go along with it. Same process. They went out and they found aggressive civil engineering firms and aggressive contractors who used the model, who have done things like using TerraModel or blade control or things like that, and said, hey, help us go figure out what can we do with civil modeling and underground utilities modeling. So we don't have to pothole everything all the time. We can do something more. And that's what they did. So same thing there. They're using things, if you're into civil engineering, they're using things like Land XML and IFCs and City XML and blade control. So there's a connection here between survey, site, and facility. So the SIM consortium deals with the site, basically everything outside the 5-foot line, and the BIM guys deal with everything inside the facility. And how do they connect? Another article, I wrote that one, so you can go see it if you want. So just like on the BIM side, all civil horizontal jobs will use civil modeling. Could be civil 3D, could be inroads, or anything else that is specified or that you can get away with. So if you use TerraModel or something like that, you can probably use that. Other things that are going on with the Corps and BIM, facility data exchange. This is what do we do with the data after we get it. And that's all Kobe. And they've got pilot projects going on right now to take that model and put it into SAP and use it for analysis, asset management. You know, they're doing, and Adam, you're mechanical here, I'm barely a mechanical, you know, like, you know, they're using the model in there and say, let's say SAP tells the work order guy of the day that I did a vibrational analysis on this VAV box, needs to be replaced. So then the BIM model comes into play and it lights up, hey, this is where that VAV box is, it's the information about it. So that's the kind of stuff that they're using the model for. And Kobe is just a way to structure the data. Quantity takeoff and advanced modeling. They are using the model from both softwares through IFC to do quantity takeoffs now. They're using the quantity takeoff manager in Navisworks as their standard for now, until something else better comes along. All disciplines. We talked about the integration site. That's located outside the 5-foot line I talked about. There's a picture of underground utilities. So yeah, they're getting detailed. standard blah, blah, decision making. So finally, proven set of requirements. You saw what they've done, 46 million square feet of stuff. Everything can be located at the, downloaded from the, all the documents can be loaded from the CAD BIM Center. You do need a password, but it's free registration, and they never change your password. All you gotta do is put in your email and say, I forgot it, and they'll send you back some cryptic, long password name. So that's kind of where the core is right now, is what you saw 5 years ago was really ramping up, and what I'm trying to tell you here is what we saw 5 years ago is still in play today, and now it's got 5 years of history behind it and 5 years of proven work. So. I put my information in here. I put my personal email in here because I represent myself on the consortia. I don't represent my company. I'm kind of emeritus on the consortia right now, and that's how you get a hold of me. And I put Steve Hutzel's information in here because he's the consortia lead. So if you got questions on the contract language, if you got questions over, hey, I want to get involved, there's a long list of getting involved, but you can at least get on the list if you want to try to get involved. They try to have I say this with respect, guys, in the back. A reseller did try to get on, and they were on for a while, and it just didn't work. So I don't know if they would go that route again, but you can try if you're interested. Open it up to whatever you guys want to talk about. Yes, sir.
So what type of,
If I can answer.
what type of project type do you see most often, and do you see that changing with design build? Because a lot of this stuff is easier depending on the contract.
Absolutely. In my experience, again, I'm not the Corps of Engineers, I can only tell you from my experience. My experience has been they have really focused on the centers of standardization when it comes to BIM, standard facilities. The other area where they've really focused is healthcare. And the healthcare, because there's more going on in healthcare on the VA side, and my experience has been on the VA side and on the defense DHR. But the other thing that they are doing a lot of lately is data centers, and that's all greenfield. I don't see a lot, well, personally speaking, I haven't seen a lot of brownfield rehab work. The only place I've ever seen that, and I don't know if the lady in the front can talk about that, but the only thing I've ever seen when it comes to BIM and rehab has been healthcare, when they go in and say, we're just gonna shut down half the building and repipe the whole thing. But then you get into really nasty things like, what are those things called? Room data sheets and, I hate room data sheets. There's a lot of requirements when it comes to doing healthcare work. There's a lot of people I've seen using VR for their healthcare work. They'll set up an operating room in BIM and then stick it out in the VR, and they'll put the goggles on and get people using it. But to answer your question, I've seen the bread and butter of the core Milcon work is centered standardization. That's where their bread and butter is. Is this on the internet?
What's that?
Is this machine on the internet?
You should be able to get to from that one, yeah.
If you're not familiar with it, okay.
But not necessarily the project type, but the contract type.
Oh, I see the contract type going design, bid, build. I think design, build will be gone in the next 5 years.
Really?
I do. Because they can't afford to do it anymore. They can't afford the time it takes to accept the design, build, bid, build, set of documents, turn around and let it, turn around and get the contract. I think they're actually gonna do more EPC. I think they're gonna spend more money to get less risk and have us take on as much risk as possible and then have a turnover. So the joint venture becomes even more important. So, I don't know, what are you seeing?
Less design bid build, specifically on that. If we have qualified project team members that are all in it together for the owner, you can really do some cool stuff with design build, but you have to have the contractor on up front. So you
Yeah.
you can work with them and their requirements, otherwise, you're doing stuff that doesn't matter.
Agreed. You asked about the contract type. I also would suggest that you will probably see more IDIQs, make talks and say talks, to help facilitate that process. So do you guys know what an IDIQ is? Okay, that means indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. So what that, here's what that means. Let's say Heath is the Kansas City district, and he has a whole bunch of work that's gotta get done. So what he'll do is he will put on the street a $50 million IDIQ RFP. And in that RFP, he will say, I am looking for teams of people, of firms, that can do military construction, vertical design for these types of facilities. Ben, Adam, and Kurt all work for 3 different firms. He's an architect, he's a structural, he's a mechanical. I don't know if you are, I'm just making it up as I go. They come together and say, we are going to go in together to go after that RFP, that $50 million IDIQ. They submit in their qualifications. You 3 do the same, you 3 do the same. You pick a winner or 2. It doesn't mean that you have $50 million to spend. It means that you have a capacity to fund it with $50 million. Then, because you've pre-qualified teams, you can go to a team and say, I have gone down to Whiteman Air Force Base and we are going to build a new set of dorms. You have said that you can do dorms. We are pre-picking you because you pre-qualified for that contract. Go. Here's the RFP. I see that happening more than anything because it shrinks the time of how long it takes to get a facility done, because all the pre-planning work is done up front. All the work to get the job and say that you can do the job. You don't have to go and interview over and over and over again for each individual RFP. It's, here's the contract. You've been pre-selected. Go get it done.
So I have another question.
Sure.
Autodesk vision for the future of BIM is a transactable, interoperable data.
Sure.
That is what you are doing, is putting this information into the model.
Yep.
So why be so strict on the requirements of the 2D output? Because that is not helpful in any way. It's restrictive. It's data that you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
So
Agreed.
what is the purpose of a CAD deliverable with very specific layers whenever the future, the requirement that you're going after is basically a national database of information for all this?
Because at the end of the day, and at the end of the line, the person at the end facility is still a guy in the field with a clipboard and a piece of paper. They haven't got to the point where they're, in all cases, where they're on an iPad looking at a 3D model linked back to their facility data. So the reason why they still do the CAD drawing with specific layers and all the CAD requirements is because the lowest common denominator for fair, practical, and reasonable is that guy at Whiteman Air Force Base. I can say that because that was me at one point. The guy down at Whiteman Air Force Base who's in civil engineering squadron, who's given a work order and going out with a clipboard. That's why they do it. They are not fully ready to handle a BIM model yet.
So that was really my question was, if these are leading aggressive BIM members, why would that not be on the roadmap of getting that part figured out instead of having all the requirements building up to that?
It is. It's just not.
It's kind
Not
of
on that one.
It's iterative, yeah.
You ever make stone soup? That's what the Army and the Air Force is stone soup. It's every facility, every base and every post wants its own say. You've got various Air Force bases that are very progressive. They've cut out 2D drawings. They're all 3D models and hooking it up to Esri and making it happen and doing what they're doing. And then you've got smaller places that just don't have that capability. And the thing is that each place has the same value of vote. So what the Corps is doing is, they know they're playing the long game here. They know what they're doing is not going to fit for everybody to throw down. They understand that. That goes back to what we talked about earlier, why do they do CADs, why is the AZ CAD stand the way it is? Because the lowest common denominator, that's all they can consume. And the other side of it too is, that's the one thing that will hold up in court. My model doesn't hold up in court. I can use it in court to prove where the drawing came from, but when I go to court, my stamp and seal is on a drawing, it is not on a model. So until that changes, and that's a state-by-state thing, there's no federal thing for that, that's an absolute state-by-state thing. Until that changes, we will have drawings for a long time.
You know, technically it's not on the DWG either, though.
Yeah, that was my question was, 2D drawings are a different conversation than exporting a DWG, because in the 2D drawing in a BIM model, you would still be able to gather the information from that model to construct off of.
Right.
You can get sizes and quantities like you're talking about.
Sure.
But a 2D CAD deliverable does not provide you that.
Well, but also realize that they're agreed. They're also still taking that data in through CAD to other places, like Archibus, like Esri. And while you can spit out 2D documentation in multiple formats, let's just say PDF or you really can take a PDF file simply into a asset management system and get the individual vectors out of it. I mean, you can, but it takes a lot of work. Again, lowest common denominator. It takes years to move. Some people, I want to say this the right way. Some people use the word Titanic because of the size of but I don't like the Titanic because it went down with the ship, right? I say the Queen Mary. It's a big boat to move, and once it gets its steam going and the rudder in the right direction, it will run you over and it will happen. It's just taking a long time to move it. To help move it, call Steve up and say you want to be involved. There are a lot of people on there that want to basically wipe out the entire AC CAD standard, saying it's a waste of time. It doesn't matter. And there's other people on there that say, but our end client is, Fort Ord, and they don't have this capability. They got to be able to consume the data, and they don't have the funding to train their people to do it.
What's your thoughts on ISC format?
IFC is a personal opinion. IFC is a nice try. I think it's a good data format. I don't think they've got the graphics figured out yet. There's so many holes in it that I don't even know where to start. It totally ignored the entire industrial industry. There's no process piping in IFC. They've what is it? 2x5 is in beta right now. 2x4 is out. 2x5 is in beta, and they're trying to do civil in there, but it's not very good. I actually, on an anecdotal note, we're trying to do some things with AI and machine learning at my company. And one project I said to do is, why don't you just stick all these data formats into AI and let them make all the connections for us? Stick in Land XML and City XML and OGC and IFC and all these different open formats. Just stick them in to Watson and let Watson go figure it out. Because that's what Watson does, right? It just finds the patterns and makes it recognize.
Sounds like that's what Autodesk wants to do too eventually with their cloud services.
Yeah.
Naturalization of the data.
Autodesk wants to own your data.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure I like that. But to get back to your question, I think IFC works really good when it comes to reading it as data. I don't think it does a very good job of reading it as graphics because everybody reads graphics differently. So I can open up IFC with a spreadsheet or the text file and it works great because I got all that data. But when you take an IFC file and you pull it into Revit, or if you pull it into Revit with the IFC toolkit, or if I pull it into Bentley, or if I pull it into Graphisoft, or I pull it into whatever, it looks different. And it's not supposed to. If you're familiar, if you want to read more about IFC and what it really can do, there's a guy in Britain, his name is Rob Jackson. He works for a company called Von Bryan Architects. He is probably the most knowledgeable person on the planet that I know about IFC. He's Mr. Open Standards. He's a Graphisoft guy. And I'll just be very blatant. Hates Revit, hates Autodesk, doesn't like dealing with it, and bangs on the Revit users because you have to do so much more in Revit to make IFC work. And but he's definitely an open standards guy. But if you want to learn, he's got like a 28-part series about using IFCs. It's really good.
What was his name? Again?
Rob Jackson,
Jackson.
and he works for Bond Bryan, BONDBRYAN Architects.
So no aspirations to make that a deliverable format for core.
It's a deliverable it's an alternate deliverable format.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll ever make it a true deliverable format because there's just so many, I mean, here's a perfect example. We're gonna go back to Adam's thing here. IFC has no way to recreate the recipe to create the 2D drawing. So if I'm go back to my roots, if I'm wiping Air Force Base and I get your Revit model through IFC, I don't get any views, I don't get sheets, I don't get nothing, I get a model. But I have a set of 2D documents over here that are stamped. I have to maintain it. So when I have to change that, and just give you a little bit of insight into this, all of the site drawings and all the drawings at any previous SALT II Minuteman missile base go to Russia. That's part of the old SALT II treaty. When something changes, it goes over there. So I have to have accountability back to how that drawing was made so I can update the model, print out the sheet, print out the PDF and send it over for archiving and for that. How can I do that if I just get an IFC model and there's no structure of how that sheet was cut, what disability settings were on, how the family, you get geometry, you don't get your families, you don't get anything else in there. So until they get that IFC better figured out, it's a nice way to communicate between JV partners. So the nice way for us to say, hey, look, here's what you need so we can do space control and interference management. It's a nice way for me to get to Cody, to put it into a spreadsheet that has a deliverable format for editing. Not for me. Plus there's so many holes on the process piping side, and the industrial side, and the civil side. It's really built as a building, that 5-foot line in.
We've seen holes there too.
And there's a lot of holes there too. I mean, you could probably stick out, you can create an IFC and half of your stuff comes out of IFC proxy. So,
We're going to Agonex's company, whatever. So we were playing with the BIM module inside of it, and it's all IFC.
Mhm.
And yeah, you miss walls, you
Oh,
miss
yeah.
columns, it's terrible.
Yep.
Like, we abandoned it pretty quick.
Yep. And that's what kind of scares me about proprietary systems is that, it's gonna end up in somebody's proprietary system, and that's not good for anybody, because then it's, they can do whatever they want with it. Hold you hostage, charge you what you want.
Did Bentley's making any progress pushing the high model? Is it the same?
Say that again?
You think Bentley's making any progress pushing the high model? Is it the same?
No,
I think they don't have a good enough marketing department to do that. I think it's a good format. I'm biased, but I think it's a good format. I think it's a better format than IFC because it works with more. But you know, they just don't do marketing very well. You know, I'm convinced that Autodesk is a marketing company that makes software. So, I'm convinced, and I've been a Bentley user for many years. I'm convinced that Bentley is a bunch of engineers and a bunch of nerds in the corner saying, "Look how cool this stuff is. Now what do we do with it?" So, you guys know the difference between an extrovert engineer and an introvert engineer?
They look at your shoes when you're talking about.
Yep, exactly.
When the two engineers come up against and you know, talking to each other, the introvert looks at his shoes, the extrovert looks at your shoes. There's jokes in there. What else, Heath? Was this worth your time? You learned something today?
Oh, yeah.
Are you gonna email a copy of this?
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to Heath.
We will get it posted up on our
Casey Rudd.
PC web page.
And if you go up there, the original presentation I did 4 years ago, this one, it's up there as well. So this one kind of goes into part of the actual contract language that defines what's a model, what is a model element, you know. Well, that was the other thing I was going to say is, this is a Sean personal opinion. This is nothing new. The Corps doesn't say this, but this is what I say. If you get an RFP and it's a raster scan and it says attachment F, I'd send it back. Because it means someone has taken a boilerplate contract from 8 years ago and contracting has just scanned it and slapped a new name on it and sent it along. Because if you look at this thing right here, can you see this says Revit, Bentley, BIM, blah, blah, blah. The Corps has what's called an RFP wizard. So when they make an RFP saying, hey, we're gonna do a new project out on the street, they actually have a website internally, and it's a wizard. What do you need to do? We're gonna do a design build. What kind of facility? We're gonna do a data center. What kind of deliverable? We're gonna do Revit. What kind of, and they just sit there and hit buttons, and then they hit go, and it spits out a Word document that they PDF and they send to you. And that PDF is searchable and like a regular PDF. If you get a scanned RFP that you know, the raster ones that you get that you can't see any words in it, someone's taken an old contract, a boilerplate thing from 8 years ago, scanned it in, slapped a new name on it, and sent it. And if you see anything with attachment F, that's definitely not the right thing to get. I'd send that back or do an RFI and say, is this what you really want? So, but anyway, back to your question. This old other one really gets more into the depth of what the pieces of the contract language say and why they say it. So, you know, what's an over-the-shoulder progress review, what is interference management, what's a visual check, what you submit, you know, submit an IFC file, you know, within 30 days after acceptance of the PXP, you have to demonstrate the plan. If you don't, the government will withhold payment. So things like that. Now, is every district holding to this contract language? I can't speak to that. I'm sure there's some are and some aren't. Some districts are very, very strict. Some districts are not. I will tell you anecdotally, I know of a firm in the south that I saw them at AU about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And they said flat out, we're not going to ever do work for District X because they're too hard. They check us too much. We'll do we'll go to District Y and Z because they don't care. We just give them a CD and they move on. So, you know, okay, you know, whatever. So I will get Keith a copy of this, the document that I've gone through today, and it's a good pair with the one that's already up there.
The one that's up there, I have to search back to about 2013, I believe it was February of 2013.
Yes,
It
it
is
is.
on there, and then we'll get this one up there pretty soon.
Yeah, so if you go back to meeting notes and go down here to, right here, February, March of 2013. There you go. Well, it was the February meeting, it was posted in March.
Okay.
So you're good.
And then, still recording over there? And that'll get posted up here pretty quick along with last month's.
We should have them up on the group's YouTube page pretty quick, and I'll try to put links into our normal web page as well, so that you can get it from both ways.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I hope you learned something. Hope it was fun. You know, like I said when I first started, I'm not going to open up any software. This is all about the whys and the hows, not necessarily the hits and bites and the bits and clicks. So. And you got lunch and you got dinner. And thank you very much for Siler for sponsoring it and being here and flying in for this. If you did not sign up, please sign up on the sign-in sheet in the back. I saw it.
Those who may or may not know, Siler Instrument is a software, Autodesk software reseller. It's one of the major, not the largest portion of your business, but that's one of the reasons why they sponsor us. And Tom take care of us is they're a reseller of the Autodesk software that we use quite commonly.
As well as Bluebeam.
Bluebeam, yes.
Oh, you're a Bluebeam reseller?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Sell, train, implement, support, all those.
Anything else, lasers? You want to get up here and talk?
Laser scanning, reality capture in general, there are a lot of tools that they support themselves.
There's more food back here too, if y'all want to take it home.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.